All right, welcome to the show. My guest today is a stand-up comedian by the name of Sandy Danto. He's also the host of a podcast titled MFers Podcast. Here's Sandy Danto.
I'm happy to be here. Full disclosure, I do have a sleeping infant, so at any moment I might have to pop up, go grab her, and hold her while I do this. But I'm just enjoying my wife's maternity leave. She's at the dentist right now, so I'm practicing for when she goes back to work, and I'm gonna start going back out on the road pretty soon. I do my podcast, MF is a parenting podcast, and I started it when I had before I had my first kid, when me and my wife were just trying to get pregnant, to just get the lay of the land of what it would be like to become a parent, doing an unconventional kind of job, and how to navigate. I just feel like it's, from my personal philosophy on life and parenting, it's just outdated to think that you can't be a good parent and still live your life, pursue your career, have a social life. Like those two things can't coexist. It's challenging for them to coexist, but
Lots of things are challenging, but it requires maneuvering appropriately with it. And you're right, we need to break those modes, because there's a lot of preconceived notions when you're sort of leading into parenthood, and I haven't come across that. You have, but you hear about it. We know about these preconceived notions. You got to give it up. You have to, and there's a lot of meaning behind that. But I think everybody listening knows exactly what you're saying, and we can all agree. And that's really inspirational to see that that's what you're doing.
Well, it's just a matter of sometimes your social life and your career is going to have to take a backseat, and sometimes your kids are just going to have to learn to supervise themselves and behave and not break stuff when you leave them home alone when they're 3 years. No, but it is a balance, but it's a doable balance. And, instead of just going out on a cocaine bender, find a drug like ketamine that only lasts like 45 minutes, it's as simple as that.
Absolutely. I follow you. Very nice, man. Now, how old is your child now? Because we're a little bit into the quarantine now for some time. And so for you, it's also, you became a parent during this time where you were really at home, and your work, your field of work, you were really to test that out in the way that it normally would run, how things normally flow.
Well, I have a 3-year-old, and during the pandemic, we became pregnant with our now almost 2-month-old. So, we didn't mean to get pregnant, but it was such a challenge getting pregnant the first time around. Me and my wife are both in our mid-30s, and so, pregnancy doesn't come easily when you get a little bit older, which is weird that when a woman turns 35 and she gets pregnant, it's considered a geriatric pregnancy, which is pretty rude. I mean, they have all these hormones rushing through their body, they're pregnant, and you have the nerve to call it a geriatric pregnancy. It just seems like a little insulting, but that's the medical classification of it. And we got pregnant this time, and when you're married and you get pregnant by accident, it's not like, oh, what are we going to do about it? It's just like, you got to take your blessings. And we wanted to have another child, but not, mid-pandemic. But it all worked out, and things are great.
Very nice. And now let's talk about the podcast and with your comedy, with your process now with the quarantine beginning to move forward. What's your writing process been like, and your plans with the podcast? So you're going to continue this podcast and keep providing that value for parents. What is that? Is this you're in for the long haul? You're going to be back on the road soon, so your time's going to be in other places.
I'm actually transitioning the podcast. A friend of mine who's a musician moved to LA recently, and he's a friend that I've a really good chemistry with. We're both weird and have strange interests, and I plan to continue talking about parenting as a part of this new podcast that I'm going to transition MFers into. But I feel as though I used MFers as a opportunity to create community and a resource for people interested in becoming parents who may be nervous about it, or unexpectedly becoming parents that need a support system. And I'm kind of on the other side of that now. I'm comfortable with it, and I feel as though comedically and just as an intellectual curiosity, I've gotten what I've needed to out of that subject matter. Not to say that I don't have a passion for parenting and don't have a passion for having a balance in my life. I think that it's really important for you to have the balance in your life, feeling fulfilled on an adult and individualistic level, because my parents' generation all had midlife crises because they had kids too young and they weren't either done living out their youth, or they just felt like they had to sacrifice so much and put their kids first and foremost for everything. And so then, their 40s and 50s come around and they're buying motorcycles and cheating on each other and getting tattoos and start drinking again. And it's like, I'm just trying to live a measured and balanced life where I take my pleasures when I can responsibly, and I enjoy the fruits of my labor in parenting responsibly and having a balance of it. And I just feel with the podcast, I've, for the most part, figured out how to navigate those waters. And I feel like I've provided a really good resource for people who are interested in it. And I'm looking to continue that on, but as a part of something different that encapsulates more of my comedic sensibilities as a whole.
Very inspirational, very well put. Now, how do you respond to some of the negative feedback if you do receive that? Or what's it been like maybe getting the opposite of that? Maybe a lot of people are agreeing and saying, you know what, Sandy, this is what we want to hear. The world's getting a lot smaller. When we hear these things, we feel like we have these same issues, same things bouncing around in our minds. And when you hear those things, it really resonates. So you're getting a lot of positive feedback, negative feedback. How are you maneuvering that?
In regards to which, the podcast or just me as a human being?
I feel like it's a new thing for you as a human being, because I think it starts with you. The podcast, I think, is a success because of you, the individual, and your belief that you should be able to be a parent and live your life this way. There's a lot of integrity to that, and I have a lot of respect for that, because it shows that you know that your life is up to you and how you decide to do it. And there's a lot of bad parents out there, and there's a lot of bad ways of doing things that people have sort of adopted. And for you to say, I'm going to grab hold of the situation, do it my way, it's really exciting. And I think it's a new thing that we're seeing with parents.
Yeah, I've definitely had negative feedback and people disagree with the approach. And look, I'm not perfect and I don't know everything. I'm just trying to figure out how to have a healthy balance for my children and for myself. And I think you sacrifice certain things, not doing things 100% by the book, but with parenting, there is no, every situation has to be catered to the unique circumstances that you're given. And I've had friends disagree with me and say that my way is selfish or delusional or wrong. And it's in some cases it has started off in, just light disagreement banter, but I've had arguments that have boiled over, and really it's just you have to come from a place where, unless you see people putting other people in danger or harm's way, that you have to be comfortable and secure in the decisions you're making, and not judge or come from a place of judgment with the way other people do it.
People confuse selfishness with selflessness very often.
Well, I think selfishness is important to an extent. Unbridled selfishness is one of the ills of our world and society, but I'm sure you've met people in your life who are so selfless that it's annoying, or there are some people that are so selfless that it's selfish because their way of indulging is by giving, and they take nothing for themselves ever. They take no interest in themselves, and they just become unhealthy, or they become mentally unwell, or it takes its toll on a human being to just give 100% of themselves out to other people. And so there has to be a balance, and you can't just feel guilty about doing things selfishly, because we all need to take care of ourselves, because there isn't somebody like a parent for every person who will look out for them when they're not looking out for themselves.
But so, Sandy, I think from what it sounds like after hearing what you had to say, a lot of parents get, especially new parents, they don't know how to do it. They don't know what they're doing. You're learning as you're going, or you're getting advice from people who have already done it. I guess the issue with that might be that they're stuck in their own ways, right? Maybe their parents, maybe both parents on both sides. What's your advice for something like that, where you have to maneuver through that and not disappoint the people around you, but also say, hey, you gotta set your foot down and say, we gotta live our lives before we let ourselves, slowly deteriorate when we start working off of somebody else's map versus our own.
Yeah. It's a very nerve-wracking concept, the idea of becoming a parent and needing to shift your focus to prioritizing someone else's life over your own. And I think the best advice that I have is just make a list of what your resources are, and don't be afraid to ask for help. Not everybody has parents to help. Not everybody has parents that live near them to help. But everybody has their own way of navigating the world and using their strengths to their advantage. And whether it's, me and my wife, neither of us have our families nearby to help out with babysitting, etc. But we became friends with neighbors of ours, one in which never had children, and she really took an interest in our daughters and loves to babysit for them. And that's been like immeasurably helpful and priceless for us. And I think that it's a matter of just opening yourself up and pooling your resources and figuring out how to make things work. People tend to adapt. And I think that the idea of freaking out or being nervous, having anxiety, it's natural and it's a hard thing to combat, but it's never productive. It's always counterproductive. And it's a natural reaction, but it needs to be something that you figure out how to cope with so that you can be a good parent. And I think the best way to do that is to figure out what your resources are and not be afraid to ask to exploit those resources.
Right, having that support system, whether it's emotionally, physically, being there to support you. If you need a day with the wife, you have a babysitter, knowing that if you are vulnerable, that support system, even if it's not with your direct family, they exist. And as long as you know how to meet those people and you find them, That's a great thing to have, and like you said, so you just got to get organized with your stuff. Anxiety, stress, those things compose of you needing or wanting to be in two different situations at once. And as a parent, it's really you got to fizzle out all that extra fuzz in your schedule, right? There's no time for a lot of those things that when we don't have kids, you really can't do that stuff. But once you can get organized with it, there's not to say you can't do exactly what you want with your life. And in many ways, you take that. Go ahead.
Right. It's like when you make a budget for your everyday life. If that's something you do, that's something I'm still figuring out. My wife is the one that takes the lead on that, but that's just part of it, is just figuring out who has the strengths, who has the weaknesses, and how to counterbalance those, but also figuring out what you can live without and the things that you need more of. And it takes a bit of critical thought and introspection, but it's something we're all capable of, and we just have to sit and focus and think. And patience is like the biggest thing. There are times with my 3-year-old where she really tests my patience, and in real time I'm thinking to myself, how am I keeping it together right now? How am I not flying off the handle? How am I not screaming at her the way I remember my parents screaming at me and threatening, like, time out or privileges taken away. And I've just learned to, meditate. If you meditate 1 minute a day, I used to think meditation made me more anxious and more angry. But it's because it's a daunting thing to think about, like, oh, I'm just going to take a half hour a day to like close my eyes and breathe. That sounds ridiculous. But if you just do it for 1 minute a day, it makes a huge difference in how you approach things and your ability to have more capacity for patience in any given situation.
Absolutely. I try to think of it as like you want to warm up your car before you get it going for a long road trip. To approach the day, maybe take that minute to just get the engine started so that you have time to assess things in a smoother motion, maybe in real time, versus things can get really mixed up really fast, especially if you're trying to travel at the speed of inspiration.
Yeah, absolutely. You got to get your muscles warmed up before you do something arduous, or you might pull or tear something. It's the same thing for your mind.
What's next for the comedy? You're going to get back on the road.
I'm going to get back. I'm just now getting back up on stage. Between the pandemic and the pregnancy, we played it really safe, but I'm vaccinated. And now that the baby came right at the time when I could start going on the road again. But I didn't want to just leave my wife to deal with a newborn and a 3-year-old by herself. But I think we're both capable now of handling both kids on our own for short stretches. And I'm ready to get back out on the road. So I've just been doing shows locally. And to be honest with you, I'm just not in, let's say, fighting shape yet. I feel like a paraplegic who's like just gotten the ability to walk again, and I'm like stumbling all over the place and falling and can't walk in a straight line, but I'm just happy to be doing this. And I'm not sure if it's going well, but I know that if I keep doing it, that it will.
I'm sure it will. It's like a muscle. You keep getting back on that stage, and just like you said, you're after having all that time off stage and all that built up momentum. I'm sure that we're going to see a lot of exciting things come out, and I'm sure we're going to get a lot of exciting things coming out of you. So very nice, Andy. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. How can our audience find your podcast?
It's called MFers, a parenting podcast, wherever podcasts are found. Spotify, Apple, iHeartRadio app, Google Play, wherever you listen to podcasts, it exists. Check out my album Daddy Boy, which I put out during the pandemic as well, but I recorded it a year prior. It takes time to mix and edit and all that. But Daddy Boy, wherever you stream music, again, Apple Music, Spotify, etc., etc. You can find me on any social media platform at Sandy Danto, SandyDanto. And watch out for me coming to your town soon.
Very exciting. Well, we'll make sure to follow up with you in the future. Sandy, we'll make sure to follow up and go ahead and have you again on the show if possible, because it's been a great pleasure to have you on.
Yeah, man. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
All right, Sandy. Well, like I said, it's been an absolute pleasure. Take care.
Later.